Childcare is playing a central role in Governor Katie Hobbs' plans to create more jobs. She's ordered a study of the state's childcare needs, linking affordable childcare to businesses' needs to hire more people. But the money to help pay for that childcare is vanishing. A fiscal cliff next year could put some providers out of business and leave some families unable to afford care. Finding a solution won't be easy. Joining us now is Kelley Murphy, Vice President for Policy at Children's Action Alliance in Phoenix. Welcome to Square Off.
Thank you.
I want to go back to what Katie Hobbs did last week. I've been to literally dozens of these kinds of economic development announcements. I have never heard childcare brought up as a business need, let alone taking some action to try to help deliver it. How new is that?
It's pretty new. I think we're seeing that reflected in the comments that she made, but also in the interest of the business community at large. They're beginning to realize that they don't have a workforce if those workers don't have some place for their children to go that's safe during the day or whenever their hours are.
And this was an event announcing apprenticeships for a semiconductor business. Does this tie into the CHIPS Act and
yeah,
language there?
A part of the Federal CHIP Act includes any organization that gets over a certain amount of funding through that program is required to present a plan for how they're going to provide child care to their employees. So rather than just building a large facility or organization, they're actually required to talk about how they're going to maintain an adequate supply of child care in the area.
Would that require financial contribution from the company or working with government?
It might. It could entail a lot of things. It might be, contracts with existing child care facilities. It could be building their own facility on site. But they're required to try and figure out how to make that work in those communities.
Is that a first?
Yeah.
And have we kind of met the moment now? Because businesses' urgency to find and retain workers is probably higher right now than it's ever been.
Yeah, there's a huge workforce issue across the state, across the country. And it's a new turn. I think 50% of Arizona is what we call a child care desert now, which means that there's not an adequate supply of child care for the number of children that need to be in child care. And so these kinds of initiatives are an attempt to address that through the business community.
So let's jump now to the fiscal cliff, not jump over the cliff, but jump to the fiscal cliff facing child care providers and families. What is it? When we say fiscal cliff, what is it?
What is it? So Arizona is facing actually two fiscal cliffs, one of which we've just passed. It was created for a couple of reasons. One is that before the pandemic, the child care system in Arizona was already struggling. When the pandemic hit, there was a realization that certain people had to work. We had healthcare workers and police and fire and grocery store workers, and those folks had to get to work, and we needed to maintain an adequate supply of child care. And so the federal government put pandemic relief funds to the states to sustain that industry, and that funding is ending in two waves. The first wave ended September 1st of this year, and the next wave will end sometime next summer. And so because of the way Arizona is set up, the first step down was a little less painful for us, but the next one is going to be greater.
When you say greater, what could that look like?
Well, we're already anticipating, and the Department of Economic Security is already telling us that probably sometime in the spring or summer of next year, we'll move to a wait list for child care assistance. And that impacts low-income working families. There are families who automatically qualify, but when we have to cut, that impacts low-income working families.
So a wait list, what does that mean?
It means they have to wait until someone exits the child care assistance program in order for them to get into the child care assistance program. So a parent with a new baby or someone who moves here for a job who needs child care assistance won't be able to get it.
And these are families who rely on subsidies to help pay for child care?
Yes.
And so at the other end, for child care providers, what does this world look like to them, this cliff look like?
Yeah, so they've been getting funding to help sustain them, and they've been able to use that to hire employees and increase wages. Child care workers are often making minimum wage, and so they've used it to raise wages or to build additional space to serve more children, or for a whole host of reasons. When that money runs out, they won't be able to do that any longer. So they'll either have to claw back pay or they have to increase rates to families, and sometimes they have to do both.
And so you describe this as affecting subsidies for low-income families. Would the effect be felt by all families?
Yes. So most child care providers of any type don't just serve kids that are low income working and getting child care assistance. They serve a variety of different families. And if that provider loses funding that they were receiving to pay for those that are on child care assistance, they have to raise rates for everyone in the program. So that cost gets passed on to all parents. If that child care provider can't sustain their business after this funding ends and they close, all of the children in that program lose their care.
So the Biden administration is proposing to spend $16 billion to restore some or all of the pandemic-era funding.
Yes.
Does that have any chance, you think, of passing
I don't think it has a good chance right now. It doesn't look like it. But it's a recognition that we need to do something to fill that gap. But as of right now, it doesn't look good.
Does the state have any means, have the means to come up with money to replace those subsidies?
I think we know the revenue situation in the state is what it is. It's not the best we've ever had right now, but child care advocates and the early childhood community are calling on the state to invest in early childhood and child care specifically, just for this reason,
So
because the gap is going to get bigger over time. So once these two cliffs are passed, they're using some federal money to kind of ramp that down. Next year, that gap is going to be even bigger.
So it sounds like we're going to be talking about this
Yes.
right up to the edge of the cliff next year.
Yes, we will.
And a lot of people, child care providers and families on the hook,
Yeah,
waiting.
yeah.
Kelley Murphy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.